All right, welcome to the Mental Fitness Podcast. I'm Mike Dunn, I'm your host. We have co-host Fran Ramsden with us, and we kind of wanted to use this opportunity to have a podcast and just sort of discuss current events and how they apply to mental fitness principles, practical way people can apply them to their everyday lives. So, I don't know, Fran, if you wanted to talk a little bit about what our idea for this project was.
Yeah, so, I think the key word you used there was practicality. Like when we were thinking about this mental fitness system and how people could, use it to train their mental faculties, their mindset, their mentality, and grow and develop as a person, including their character, it needed to be something that was practical. Like when you look at other options or just other means and ways of going about it, they seem to be very abstract. A lot of big idea concepts that just don't have real application to everybody's life. And so we wanted to make sure that with the things, that we're teaching and the things we're talking about and discussing actually apply to the people's life that's listening. And so the idea is we're going to put some of our video series and playlists on YouTube. That is kind of where we're going to hit more of the philosophical side of the things that we want to talk about and teach. And then we want to have the podcast, which is more of a laid back version, something way less informal, as a way to really try to communicate that everyday dealings that the audience will identify with. And then from there, I think that just allows us another means to make contact with people and to have that relationship start to build.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess today, the big current event story obviously is the coronavirus. So I think we can talk about a couple things there. I think, obviously, one, what are things that people can do during this time being in quarantine? And then also sort of just look at big picture, how we got here, where things are sort of headed and what it means now moving forward for us.
Yeah, so you want to start on practical things people can do at home?
Actually, I think we should start with big picture, maybe to give more context,
okay.
And then we can talk about what that means. So this thing's new. It's interesting because it's something we haven't had to deal with specifically this exact case before, but similar situations human society has had to deal with. So it's kind of, if this isn't our thing, it's at least practice for it. Each generation sort of has their big experience that they go through. If this isn't ours, again, it's sort of our practice for it. So it's new to us, but there are lessons we can learn from the past on how to deal with these things.
Yeah, so for me, do you think anything, like when we're talking big picture and talking about maybe like once in a lifetime or like your top 5 sort of like, I don't know if the word tragedy or the historical event, do you think it matters at all, the build up to it, like how people, either see this particular scenario unravel? Because it almost seems like yesterday when people were making jokes and saying like it's no big deal, and then here you are, lockdown and economy down the tubes. Do you think it all matters how people perceive these events before they happen, as any sort of bearing on how to handle it, or would you say that that's like a separate thing or removed?
No, absolutely. That's one of the major things, and again, here we can tie it into mental fitness. That's one of the ideas is really the way you perceive a situation is going to affect how you approach that situation. And of course, how you approach it is going to affect the outcome. And it all starts with your mentality and attitude going into it. So if this goes back even before the virus happened, people have been telling us for years that this is something that's going to happen eventually and something we have to worry about. And so preparedness is the first thing. And then once it happens, sort of adapting to the situation to remain prepared, or to get prepared quickly.
Yeah, right.
So, but yeah, if you don't take it seriously, you're going to be late to react to it. But at the same time, you don't want to overreact and panic. I think the best thing you can do is look at the situation as realistically as possible, so you know how to actually handle it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always like, and that's actually the tough part to separate is when most people's sources of information are like social media, and I like that people are able to communicate and send information to one another and to broadcast their own points of view. But I think sometimes people obviously allow that to shape their own perspective, and that's something we talk about a lot in mental fitness, which is like people really need to get back to forming their own opinions on things, and it's like, how do you do that? Which definitely a complicated topic, but that, and at least that journey and progress towards that, learning to intake information is just one piece of the pie. But regardless, that journey of learning to formulate one's own opinions, I think, is paramount and a skill. It's actually a skill, and that's not something that I think is easily found in all human beings. Like that's something that people would like think and like, oh, almost dismiss, even like, oh yeah, of course people make their own decisions. It's like, well, do they? Like if you really look at most people's behavior, they more than likely replicate or regurgitate, at least the way I see it. And so they hear or they see one post on social media as just an example, and without doing any additional work or thought, thinking behind it, next time that topic comes up with a friend or something, they cite that article that they saw. And so then you have this, environment where information is easily passed along, and then you end up with like half of it being right, half of it being wrong, and then you got people all over the place. So, I think being able to formulate one's own opinion, and again, creating that process for yourself as part of a mental fitness training, I think is something that, again, is a valuable skill and can translate to, a situation like this where even as today, we're getting stats in almost on the daily about what's transpiring, and you'll have people on both sides, either people making it way worse, blowing it way out of proportion, and then you got people that are like still dismissive as if it's no concern whatsoever. And the truth's somewhere in between those.
Right, and that's usually the case in the way it works, where the truth lies in between. That's a good point about sort of critical thinking and forming your own opinion. I think we can use this sort of as an opportunity to show people maybe sort of our process, because I think part of one of the best ways to do it is to bounce ideas off of other people, have those ideas critiqued, and both people involved need to understand the goal is to discover the truth, figure out what actually is real, and not, where both sides aren't trying to be right, where they're actually trying to move the idea forward. So, again, we kind of want to use this podcast in general as an opportunity to do that, to sort of showcase some of our discussions in general. We're going to get things wrong at times. We're going to disagree at times and go back and forth, and one of us will look better at times, the other one won't. But I think we want to put it out there, open it up for people to see that that's part of the process to getting to the truth and discovering the truth. So with the virus, some things, again, with all the differing information, some things I think we can conclude from it is that this is going to take a while to get over. Hopefully we can get through it quicker than expected, and with the least amount of pain as possible. But I think we do need to be realistic that 2 weeks wasn't a realistic goal, and I don't know how realistic 1 month is. That being said, we don't need to panic. We just need to understand this is what we have to do to get through it. My reason for thinking it's going to take long is that at this point we've admitted that there's no stopping it. Part of the plan now is herd immunity, which requires a certain percentage of people to get it. So the question isn't, how many people are going to get it, it's when. And the main issue is not overwhelming the healthcare system. And so what we need to do is balance many things. A lot now you hear the conversation being framed as like economy versus people's health. And like you said, we get misinformation on both sides. People saying the virus isn't nothing to worry about, and people overblowing the effects of the virus. I think the main concern isn't the virus, it's the ripple effects that a widespread virus will have, both on the economy and overwhelming our healthcare system. And so you need to balance those two things, because if people don't have money, they're gonna die that way. There's gonna be side effects. If too many people get sick at the same time, our healthcare system won't be able to handle it, and people will die as a result of that. Right now, blood donors are already down. We've heard about the ventilators, but there's other ripple effects that will come from this. So we need to balance it. That's the that's the major thing, but that's going to require sort of a dragged out process, and it's also going to require everyone to realize that it's going to take some time. Things aren't going to go back to normal tomorrow, and we all need to sort of help each other out along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, when you try to look at any of the statistics with an open mind, I think there's a couple of things that jump out is definitely the contagious rate, or the like how easily it can spread. And then the other thing to me is the lower. I mean, it's hard to always say this, but like a small percentage of mortality, right? Like it's not like 50% of people are dying, which would be astronomical. That would be absurd, right? So, those two things, right? Spreads pretty easily and rapidly, and it tends to kill people that have multiple health considerations and that are in either like below average to poor to average health, and it's not necessarily, killing everybody in their 30s, although you see social media where they put the one story out that, a 37, healthy person died. And like we said, especially the stats game is always very interesting because there's never absolutes in stats. So you're always going to find, exceptions to those, to trends, right? But I think if we speak in general, that's a good position to take, especially on this, because you don't want to go the opposite, which is go too specific and be wrong. Like you said earlier, this isn't about being right or wrong. It's about finding the truth. And, so yes, people have these agendas, or they have certain viewpoints that they're trying to share. But if you're going for truth, again, I think the two stats that really pop out is how easily this can go from one person to the other. And like you said, that results in overwhelming the healthcare system. And that's any healthcare system. That's not, America or Europe or Italy. Like, that's every healthcare system. You can't have, a large percentage of the population get sick with the same ailment that requires the same treatment, whether that's a limited capacity. Like, that's always going to result in that. So the high infectious rate, is something to take a look at, but then at the same time, being realistic about the death rate. I think, I've seen it across the board, but I don't think I've seen it higher than between 1% and 3%, right? So most people do get healthy, and every day they do put those stats about, I think today it's at 100 and, I don't know exactly, but like a large percentage of people have got the virus, went through it, got better. So, you're always trying to balance these things. So like you said, it's not the end of the world. There's going to be people that die, and that's something I actually think is a very fascinating topic, is the topic of death in general, because we tend to avoid that. That's a topic that we don't discuss, we don't share. I think I saw President Trump say it the other day. He said something like, there's going to be a lot of death this week. And just that headline pops, to say that there's going to be death. It's like, what? You can't say that. Like, that's horrible. That's bad. And, that's just going to be a fact of life in this instance. People will get coronavirus and die. And a large percentage of people will get it and survive. And so you said, something else I think we need to talk about and tie into this is controlling what we can control. Right. So we talked about this balanced approach. We're talking about not freaking out like it's the worst thing in the world. And then at the same time, not taking it so lightly. We have to find that balance. But I think also tied into all this is learning to look at everything and what we can control. We cannot control the infection rate. We cannot control, like, if I get it necessarily. Yes, I can do things to try to prevent myself from getting it or to lower my risk. But at the end of the day, like, you as an individual, it's going to be hard for you to control the total population accelerant rate. Now if everybody does their part, that's something that we can control. But in a vacuum, this thing is going to run its course. It's not going to be gone next week, no matter, almost no matter what we do. That's not likely. So again, we can have a whole discussion here about things that are in our control and things that we can do to push forward through this scenario that will yield a good outcome.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe we can sort of transition here into the more practical aspect, because, you have the bigger picture where, again, we're looking things you can control, things you can't. As a society, we're trying. The American way is not to be over controlling. So we're asking people, please do the best that you can. Please stay at home, sort of take responsibility upon yourself. So as a society, big picture, we have to sort of just realize this thing's going to take a while, and all do our part. So yes, and now on the more practical level, personal responsibility, yeah, do your part, limit how much you can go out, but at the same time, realize that you can't control how much other people are going out. If the person working at the store hasn't been taking proper caution, that's really outside of your control. So you need to just do everything within your own power to stay clean. That, again, doesn't mean overreacting. That doesn't mean never leaving. It just means taking the necessary precautions.
Yeah, like how disastrous would it be to one's mindset if they were constantly worried about, let's say, catching the virus from somebody at the grocery store? Like, to the point you just said, like, you're not going to be able to control what other people are doing. But in this scenario, wouldn't the individual in question, if they were so worried about that, just not go to the grocery store and neglect other things like, nutritious food or things like that? Is that what we would be talking about as something that we shouldn't worry about? Is that a good or bad example?
Well, again, yeah, you want to, you can always reduce your risk at a cost. Again, like you said, you don't have to leave your house, but at a certain point, you still have to eat. The trade-off is that you're not going to get the virus, but you're not going to eat, and you're still going to die that way of starvation. There's a trade-off at the end of the day. But don't be an idiot when you go out. Do the things you can.
Well, it's even like
hands, do the gloves.
Think
and
about the
masks.
stress factor,
Don't
right?
Go
like
more
this is
than
the
you have to, but yeah.
Like so to me, I think people underestimate the stress factor as well that is placed on the human body. I've got people in my personal life who, at one point or time or another, have had high levels of stress, and in some cases, it's actually led to physical ailments. I think that's a common thing for some people. If you're somebody who has high levels of stress or anxiety, you may have even felt sick at times, nauseous, upset stomach, headache, cramps, things like that. And so, during this time, while it could be easily understood to be stressful, like I don't know if me or you would like question an individual if they were feeling stressed right now, but that doesn't mean necessarily that should be the aim, right? Like that shouldn't be,
Right.
I get nervous, not necessarily nervous, I guess, but I caution our society right now where we tend to skew towards not offending, right? And not saying things that would offend an individual, even when that demands we suppress the truth. So that's kind of a big issue for me personally, and I know it probably is for you as well, considering it's our number one principle in our mental fitness system is truth. I feel like, suppressing truth in order to not make somebody like stressed or if you're suppressing truth to avoid something else, I don't know if that's necessarily a good angle to take.
Right. And yeah, I mean, again, that's why it's our number one principle, and that's why here we're going to get some stuff wrong, and that's fine. What we want to do is open up conversation. If anyone listening does think we're wrong, please engage with us. We'd love to correct ourselves wherever that is. But that's going to require being willing to make some mistakes and get some stuff wrong here and there.
Right. As well as the people trying to correct us, they have to, in order to try to correct us, they have to risk being wrong themselves. So it creates actually a healthy dynamic where everybody then should have a common goal to get the truth.
Right. And so, if we're worried more about our own reputation and being right, then you're going to get offended if you turn out to be wrong here or there along the way. But if, again, you just change your mind where you're wrong so that you're now right, there's no reason to be offended. Someone pointed you in the right direction. They didn't, you're only an idiot if you continue holding that point, that viewpoint.
And then I want to make sure I close the loop on my point about stress and stuff, just because I thought I left it hanging there a little bit, which is, you talked about trade-offs. Well, one of the trade-offs is, if you go too far on the spectrum towards safety, I suppose, or like isolation, again, is when you have to get out of that bubble and that safety zone, you're going to experience high levels of stress. And where I was going with it is it's wrong now, generally viewed in society, to tell somebody that it's wrong for them to feel stressed, right? So, for instance, ready to give you an example, imagine somebody is at home. They are really, really taking caution about leaving the house, which is generally a good thing. But then they start to cross that line and start to do it to the point of detriment. There's no physical activity. They're not getting fresh air. They're not getting sunlight. They're waiting the last minute to get groceries. They might not find everything that they need at the store because people are going to are shopping more and stuff like that, and stockpiling, on and on and on. And then when they do have to venture out, they're worried that every little thing can give them coronavirus. The car, I better wipe down the car. Oh, the handle. The person gave you that meat. I better throw the meat away. Like, you can see how this could spiral down very, very, very rapidly. And my point being about truth is that's where somebody in their life is allowed to tell them that is a detrimental behavior. You know what I mean? Like, I think you are able to tell somebody that is not ideal, and then you have that conversation, right? Like we talked about this whole time. It's about it's worth risking yourself being wrong in order to try to go after progress. And for me, like, when I go to the grocery store, I'm definitely 1000% limiting my exposure, both how often I'm going and doing different things, and even when I'm there, I'm trying to like be smart about it. I'm not touching everything. I'm not, I'm not going crazy. I'm not going all over the place acting like everything's normal. At the same time, I'm happy to report I've got like 2% stress levels, like when I'm out and about.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because I'm seeking truth. I'm going after this scenario for what it is. I'm being extremely realistic, and right now at this point in time, my likelihood of contracting the coronavirus in Pittsburgh by going to the grocery store one time, like once every 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it ends up being, getting sick with the coronavirus, dying age 29, being extremely healthy, is very, very low statistically. That way, it can't happen. I could certainly get it and die, certainly, but realistically and statistically, it's very low. Likelihood's low. So for me, that trade-off between low risk, low levels of stress, or low levels of risk mortality is low. My stress levels should match that. I shouldn't have like supreme levels of stress, at least in my opinion. That's the ideal scenario. And I'm not saying that's attainable in all individuals, or sometimes it's not even practical. Sometimes we're talking about practicality. Sometimes it is worth being scared and things like that. But again, it's this balance that we're talking about today. The balance of what are the facts, what's really going on with this damn thing, where do we sit, and then how do we best try to live our lives given these circumstances. And I do think it's a mistake if you go too far the spectrum one way or the other, but specifically what I'm talking about is going too far towards the safety, scared, cautious stress route.
Right. Yeah, it can add additional stress. So kind of like I said in the beginning, if this isn't our opportunity as a generation to deal with something, it's practice for it. And so use this opportunity as practice best you can if you're stressing now. This is difficult. What we compare it to is physical fitness. So if you haven't worked out in a year, touched a weight in a year, you're not just going to wake up one morning and do 100 push-ups, right? You're going to start with 10 and work your way up. And over time, you're going to build your muscles up. And it's the same thing with mental fitness. Over time, you'll build your mentality up. So at first, just saying don't stress, we understand that that's not going to work. But as you keep telling yourself and changing the way you frame things, so as you said, there's risks, certainly, and you should take precautions, but also understand that there's other risks that you take every day, right? Like, we know the statistics on driving and car accident deaths, and there's probably a higher risk of driving to the grocery store than there is of getting the virus at the grocery store, statistically. Again, that doesn't mean be careless on both ends. Like, still wear a seatbelt, still do right? Take as many precautions as you can, but still recognize there's a risk involved in everything you do. So sort of reminding yourself of these things is one way that both you and I look at it and are able to reduce our stress. So we understand that telling yourself this isn't going to work at first, but you have to keep doing it and keep reminding yourself, that there's things that you can control and things that you can't. The things that you can control, you need to actually focus on. And one of those things is how we respond to stress. And what we need to remind ourselves is that even if the situation is stressful, being stressed out doesn't help us. It doesn't make it any easier. It doesn't help us get through it. So what we need to do is look at the situation realistically, look for the truth, and then how to, proceed based on that. And again, it may not be an ideal situation. Sometimes you only have two, unpleasing options, but one's still better than the other. You have to take the best option available.
So I want to float something to you and see if you're on board with it. So I'd like to tell a story about stress and worry, if you wouldn't mind, and then we can, after that, talk about some practical tips for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right. So I was listening to a podcast, and the speaker of the podcast was talking about in his neighborhood, the local government was considering putting in speed bumps. Okay. To stop, cars from driving fast through the neighborhood. And, he had young children, so he supported that movement. And so, you go to a couple of these city government council meetings and they start talking about it more. And what ends up happening is, they approved it, or they were, very close to doing so. And then he realized that when people put these speed bumps in, they also have to put in a sign that says, hey, speed bump ahead, go slow, right? You can't just flop speed bumps in the middle of the road without telling people.
Right.
And so he started to do like a little bit of research, a little bit of digging, and he found that like they would put this sign like 2 houses in from like the intersection, right? Like 2 houses in, and then the speed bumps were like the 4th and 5th house down, right? And he lived on the 2nd house from the intersection. And it's like this huge sign. He's like, well, I don't want that sign in my yard. I don't want that. I don't want that there. That's ridiculous. So then all of a sudden he like completely reversed his opinion and was like stressing out about this sign that's going to be in his yard, like this huge yellow sign that he didn't want there, didn't look good, this, that, and the other, right?
Yes.
So he went out and he bought himself a 7-foot bush or tree. And he went around to like because I think like where he would, it's like, be like one of those housing plans where like there's a couple of them in a row together.
Yeah.
And like his particular one didn't have it, but the other ones near him did. So he went to the other ones and like measured exactly like the footage away from the street, like where'd they put this thing. He put that damn bush there. Put the bush where he projected they put the yellow sign, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he puts his plant there. He's like, look, I'll show them. They'll have to put the sign, somewhere else, or it'll at least be covered up. Like the bush can cover up the sign from our point of view and from, everybody else seeing the sign there. Well, this was like a 2-year process, between they first started talking about the speed bumps to him getting this bush, to him doing all this measuring. It's like a 2-year process. And at the end of 2 years, they didn't put the sign there. They put it on someone else's property anyway. And so he was saying how all this stress that he did the last 2 years over worrying about a stupid sign, it wasn't even like an actual concern. And so he now says when he drives and pulls in, he looks at his worry bush. That's what he calls it, his worry bush. Like it's a 2-year worry. And essentially his takeaway message was like, tomorrow will have its own stresses. You should focus on today. Don't be worrying about stuff that hasn't even transpired yet, things that haven't come to be. Like, quit worrying about, what may happen, what could happen. And if everybody just took that one practical tip of trying to stay focused on what's in front of their plate today, what's something that they can control today, that's just one way to lower your stress levels and your worry. What do you think of that little story there, Donna?
I think it's good. I think there's it's 2 big things I want to mention off of it. I agree 100% with what you said. And yeah, it's kind of, if it's outside of your control, right? If there's nothing that you can do to affect it one way or another, right? It wasn't because of all his work with the bushes and whatnot that they went in someone else's yard. And had they decided to go in his yard, they were going to do it. bush or not, he would have had to remove the bush. It would have been additional stress. So if it's outside of your control, really, there's no point in worrying, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen anyhow. And so he would have still had just as much stress. He just would have had the sign in the yard. And the second thing, what I really liked that he did was repurpose it, right? Now he has a worry bush, but instead of allowing it to continue to add stress on top of the 2 years, he's now turned it in a way to reduce other stressful things in his life. Next time he gets stressed out and he pulls into his house, he looks at that bush and says, okay, not worth it. And so he's able to recycle that stress and save himself future stress as a result. So I think that's a big lesson that people should realize too. Whenever something happens, this is why reflection is important. Look back on it and take the lesson to the future.
Yeah, I think stories and jokes in particular have a great way to relate these concepts that we're talking about to people, because sometimes they just hear us talk, or they hear us like, talk about a little bit of philosophy and theorize, and sometimes we can get people lost, but like, trying to get the, like you said, the practicality of what we're talking about is what's going to make people be in tune with this type of podcast and this style. And I think that kind of segues into what we talk about next here, which is give people some tips to close out this podcast. Talk about what you guys can actually do, instead of us, just going on about, oh, we shouldn't worry. Like, okay, if you're on board with that and now you're hungry for more and you're like, okay, great, we'll give you some things to do. We got them. So why don't we do this? Why don't we go every other for a little bit, maybe a couple minutes, where I'll go first. This will also, since we're doing this like live, we're definitely not like pre-writing this whole thing out and making it real scripted. This will also give you time to think of like a good one too. But I'll go first. I'll give a practical tip, explain it, how people can utilize that, and then you can go and give one, and I'll give one. Maybe we'll just do it a couple times, and by the end of it, people will have 4 or 5 things to focus on, and that gives them something that I think can help them manage the stress. Does that sound good?
Yeah, definitely. Good idea.
Okay. So I think the first thing people should focus on is it's actually a what do they call that thing, like in math, where there's 2 negatives that equal a positive, whatever the hell that thing's
double
called.
Negative thing.
Kind of like,
yeah,
double negative. There you go. And that is to not neglect your physical fitness. If you look at any of these orders that have been given by any of the governors or the president, nothing, one of the excuses on there for allowing people out of their homes is for exercise. Now, that wasn't picked out of thin air. They just didn't put that on there to be popular. They put that on there because there's actually a practical use behind that. And, I'm not naive. We have a business that is for physical fitness. So I'm very familiar with the statistics of the United States and our obesity rates and our health rates. And frankly, it's not good. We're approaching 40% for the adult obesity rate. Yes, folks, 40%, like almost half of our adults are not even overweight, because like that's a whole category. You have like normal weight, and then it's overweight, and then it's obese, like the highest category. And we've got 40% people approaching that, which is not good. So I'm not going to act like everybody's fit and loves running around and exercising to begin with. That being said, the thing that we cannot deny is the benefit of exercise. Every single person, no matter what age. The beauty of being in this industry, in this business, the reason why I get so excited every single day to work on this stuff and to talk about it is because it's for every single person. It doesn't matter if you're 73, you're 9, you're 25, you're 40. Exercise, both physically and doing mental fitness training, I think have practical use for every single person. You can always get better. There's not like an end game, right? There's always like a continuum for your health. And so for me, neglecting your physical health during this time is only going to add stress. Imagine, not only are you someone that's stressed about the coronavirus and getting it and dealing with other people and worried about that, but now if you neglect your physical health, now when this thing's over, you're going to be a lot unhealthier. Whether that's you gain weight or you neglect your immune system, you don't take the right foods, vitamins, minerals, things like that. So that's my big practical tip is whatever you're doing, would you stop, take some pause? I don't care if you've never exercised in your life. This is a great time to start. Fantastic time, especially if you're somebody that either works from home or is even laid off in a bad scenario. Laid off or fired or whatever, can't work right now, you're at home. It's a great time to try to get some physical activity, especially if you've never done it before. For those of us who have worked out before and exercise, time to adapt. You got to find a new way of doing it. Most of us don't have access to heavy weights. We can't weight lift. Our gyms are closed. Our apartment gyms are closed. You might only have a few pieces of equipment. Now it's not the time to complain. Now it's time to adapt. So my big tip is finding ways to put physical exercise and activity into your life. And it, just to give a couple examples, body weight routines. Just go on YouTube, type in body weight workout. There'll be tons that come up. Same thing for Google. You can search on Google or YouTube any of these things. Body weight routine. You can even do like yoga and active yoga and stretching, things like that. Plenty of videos and plenty of free information there. If you have a dog, you know how every single person that has a dog, if the dog has to go to the bathroom, you like put it on the leash and you walk outside for 3 minutes, it pees and you go right back inside because you don't want to be out there. Every single person's done that. Yeah, so instead of doing that, how about every once in a while, take the dog for a 20-minute walk? You know what I mean? Just finding little things like that, I think, are really practical ways to keep your physical activity up, keep your health boosted as best you can. There's actual chemical releases that happen when your body goes through exercise, physical activity, good chemical releases. So you'll get those things like enjoyment, fulfillment. Those feelings can come in, as well as, again, maintaining your health through this crisis so that when it's over and we're through it, you're not stuck with a way less fit body. So that would be my first tip.
Yeah, I think it's a good tip. I think it can apply to everyone. I do want to point out, because as you mentioned there are people in different situations right now. So we understand that we're talking to a general audience and that each person's going to have their own specific situation and issues that they're dealing with. Addressing those each separately is really the best way to do it. But again, we realize that the person who is now unemployed, and there's a high percentage, and it's only going to continue going up as people use their part-time or paid time off, the people that are out of work and need to support other people, we need to, their solutions are going to be a little bit different. Their level of stress is going to be much higher, and what they need to do is basically just get back on their feet as quickly as possible. Try to be as creative as they can.
Cracking me up.
I got the dog
gotta go on a walk.
Sorry about that. We're gonna go out on that walk you're talking about, and there goes my clock that you love. See, he heard you say that word, and now he's all excited.
Yep, that's the way it goes, man.
Hold on, buddy. 2 more minutes. We gotta give a couple more tips. Dogs are a good way to reduce stress at times, or they can add them. They can be interruptive.
Yep.
All right, so I'm sorry. Give me one moment.
Here's what I'll do. I'll give the audience the last tip. You can put yourself on mute.
All right.
We'll go from there, and then if you're back for the wrap up, we'll wrap it up together. If not, I'll close her out. The last practical tip that I have for people that something that they can start doing in their lives is personal development. Now that comes in many forms. Obviously, that's broadly speaking, but I do think that there's opportunities to develop yourself and to grow your character. Now, obviously, mental fitness training is like one way to do that. I'm not talking about I'm not salesy or anything like that right now. I just mean in general, if you listen to things that we're talking about on the podcast and you practice some of this stuff, like trying to reduce your stress levels, controlling things you can control, to me, that's active mental fitness training. So that's an area that you could do it in. I think reading is extremely powerful. There's multiple things that you can read. You can read for entertainment, which, oh my God, now my camera's off. So you can read for entertainment, right? If you read something for enjoyment, I think that's the potential benefit, obviously. I think, reading a book, like a business book or a human development book where they're talking about how to develop a certain skill set, I always think that that's valuable. So, that's an option for people. And then things, especially during this time, around kind of like calmness or meditative things. So, meditation, if you've never tried it, this could be a good opportunity for it. Again, you can go to YouTube for free and just find stuff. There's a couple apps out there for free that are like guided, so you don't really need to do anything yourself. You just kind of go listen to what they say, and it's a good way to get yourself introduced. Like we talked about earlier, for physical activity like yoga, yoga has a certain aspect to it that is like mental and stress relieving in and of itself. And then lastly, if you're somebody that is like, religious, having that special time to either study out of the Bible or pray, or ponder life and ask for discernment and clarifications on things. I always think that that's important to have that that aspect of it, especially if you're someone that's spiritual. So again, you have opportunities to work on yourself. Like you can get better. Like you can come out of this thing with a new skill set, or new attributes if you spend the time wisely.
Yeah, definitely. I made it back.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I just wanted to touch on my other point real fast, and I'll wrap up with that. It's just that, yeah, so if you're someone who, again, is supporting other people and may not be in a position to use this time to work on yourself, again, don't be afraid to ask for help. And if you're someone, again, who is looking for something to do during this time, be willing to help others, right? This is a good opportunity for us to get back to being more neighborly, more as a community. It's interesting. We are all sort of getting stir crazy and everything, but if you really think about it, the last 10 years we've all spent in isolation. Even when you go out in public, you're still on your phone. Now all of a sudden being stuck on your phone just because we're forced to and have to, it's stressful. But I think this can be a good opportunity to become more neighborly. And again, if you're someone sitting at home looking for something to do, a way to be more productive, be creative and look for a way to help other people, because you will end up learning something out of it and you will feel better about yourself.
All right, man. Anything else you want to add in here before we just wrap this thing up?
No, I think it's pretty good. Anyone has any comments, questions, anything like that, we'd love to engage with them. So please reach out, let us know, and talk to you guys next time.
Yeah, easiest way to do that, I'll put it in real quick, is Facebook and Instagram. Just search the handle @RamsdenMentalFitness, @RamsdenMentalFitness. You'll find our page. Simply follow it or like it, and then you can send a message directly on those platforms. We will look to integrate questions or comments and feedback onto the podcast. We want this to be a dialogue. This isn't just me and Dunn, know everything, just, hear us roar. This is definitely not that. So, don't be afraid to reach out. And then the last bit is Twitter too. We're pretty active on Twitter. If you go, the Twitter handle is @RamsdenMF, @RamsdenMF. You can find us on there. So, and those 3 platforms is great. And, like Dunn said, if you guys have comments and feedback, we'll, happy to take that into account and then put it on the air and discuss those ideas. So we hope to hear from you guys. Thanks.